This is how I know Drake Bell's father was not lying.
In episode 3 of Quiet on the Set, allegations are made that Brian Peck has been extremely inappropriate with children on the set, like Drake Bell of Nickelodeon, but also Leo Dicaprio when he was on Growing Pains.
Maybe walk over to Drake and be feeding him some lines or whatever and put his arm around his waist. Put his hand up on his shoulder and kind of run it down his arm and things like that. And this would happen routinely.
Leo, as you know, is the latest, hottest, hunkiest teen idol there is.
Yeah, muscles.
Look, speaking of hunky, huh?
We draw drawings of each other. Brian is the famous artist, and we always make fun of each other and portray each other in silly, satirical ways.
But that's not all. 2 days ago, Corey Feldman from The Goonies, one of my favorite movies of all time, chimed in to say that he is well aware of the issues with Brian Peck.
Hey Corey, what do you think about the allegations of Drake Bell from Brian Peck?
I believe every word of it. We talked about Brian Peck in my movie.
Oh, you talk about?
Yeah, my truth.
Hey, nobody believe you, right?
When we put out my truth. Well, I don't know if they didn't believe me about Brian Peck. I don't think nobody believed anything about none of it. I think everybody believed it that got to see it. The problem was people couldn't see it because it was stolen, just like my voice was stolen when the film came out and they hacked it, sent a DDoS server attack, shut down the stream, took all the profits, and disappeared into the woods. So there you go. So I hope very deeply and dearly that this film is seen the way it's meant to be seen, and that it's, streamed and the message gets out very clearly, because these monsters need to be stopped. They need to be stopped. And a guy like Brian Peck has been doing this for decades, and it's been reported widely many, many times over.
Even when he was an actor?
When he was an actor?
Yeah.
He was a voice coach.
Oh, voice coach?
Dialogue coach on 2.5 Men. Come on, we all know this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and after he was, this was all reported in my film, by the way, but after he was convicted for his crimes, he was told he could not be anywhere around children, and somehow he was given a job.
Welcome down the rabbit hole. Things are about to get pretty unreal, my friends. So, in the 3rd episode of Quiet on the Set, Drake Bell tells his story of abuse at Nickelodeon. I wonder how many of you have heard of Drake Bell before. I didn't know him so well, but he was a child actor who began acting in the 1990s. He appeared on Home Improvement and several commercials until he was picked up by Nickelodeon. He played starring roles in The Amanda Show and a sitcom called Drake and Josh.
In January 2004, Dan Schneider launches his next big show.
Nickelodeon presents Drake and Josh, premiering
from 2004 to 2007, and that's pretty much what he is most well known for. He also voiced a character on a show called The Fairly Odd Parents. He's received many Teen Choice Awards as well as Young Artist Awards from Hollywood. Drake also fancies himself a musician, and maybe he was a musician before all of the acting. He began his musical career by contributing to the soundtrack of Drake and Josh.
Drake Bell is a multi-talented singer, writer, and actor.
I just released this single. It's #1 on the rock charts right now in Mexico.
And he has released independent studio albums. All right, here's the thing I need to get out there from the start for all of you that are lifelong Nickelodeon fans. I am personally not a fan of Drake Bell on a human level. When he appears in this documentary, I initially, I'm sorry to say, got a really bad feeling about him. And I hate saying that because he is a victim. And actually right now, with the release of the documentary, he's gone to rehab to get some additional support because he's really struggling. But here's the thing, and it's all I'm going to say right now. Drake rubs me the wrong way. He comes off as someone who has adopted the characteristics of those who have preyed upon him. And many of you know that I have been working long-term in a facility for children who are sex offenders. And I have seen many kids who have participated in predatory-like behavior and who I would still consider to be someone that I could reach out to, someone that I can connect with, someone that I can work with. But Drake is the kind of person who from a distance gives me a bad feeling. And I have to say that after doing further research, I realized that Drake has been held accountable in a courtroom for being inappropriate with a young girl before. We'll be reviewing all of that in the next video, but for now, we're going to focus on what happened to Drake at Nickelodeon Studios.
Dialogue coach Brian Peck is arrested.
We were still in shock of the announcement that.
So Brian Peck had been working as a dialogue coach on so many sitcoms around Hollywood, and most recently in the 2000s, he had joined Dan Schneider's team working on Nickelodeon. His practice was focused on working with children. That's why he was also a part of the Growing Pains cast.
And when this is announced, it is said that these charges are related to a child actor.
So Brian is openly gay, and he has seemingly a good deal of money with a large house filled with Hollywood memorabilia items and things like arcade games. He frequently threw parties for the cast with parents and children and cast members all attending. I wonder if people felt more comfortable with him because he was openly gay. Now, what happened has nothing to do with sexual preference. A predator is a predator regardless of the preference. But seemingly, so many parents trusted Brian Peck. And Drake Bell's mom ended up trusting him way too much. So let's talk a little bit about Drake Bell's family and why he was potentially already at risk from the time when he first stepped on to the Hollywood scene.
I started acting when I was 5 years old.
So Drake Bell was a precocious little kid out in California who started acting at the age of 5.
My mom and my dad were going through a divorce.
This is a picture of the Bell family. I think it's so funny and telling to just the kind of people they are living out in California, looking for that Hollywood dream. And Drake's parents end up getting divorced when he's pretty young. His father ends up getting primary custody and decides that he wants to put his son into Hollywood. He wants him to be an actor. He thinks it's a great opportunity. Essentially, it sounds like he feels it's a great opportunity for them to quote unquote have something to do together, aka make some money.
I love to make people laugh. I was just drawn to old movies.
So being super honest here, Drake sounds like a people-pleasing kid who was desperate for attention. And that is absolutely perfect for the Hollywood, Disney, Nickelodeon scene. They want kids who feel a need to perform, who want to make the adults around them really happy. And it sounds like Drake fit in to that category. And it would also be part of what led him down the road towards being preyed upon by someone like Brian Peck.
And I started taking him to auditions.
And got a manager and an agent, and then we were off.
Okay, so Brian's dad does seem very involved and loving throughout this episode of the show. He goes to bat for his son. He's one of the only dads on the set, available, driving him everywhere, trying to push his career forward. And he's terribly, terribly upset about what ends up happening to his son Drake. But at the same time, there's no denying that it seems like this family was really depending upon Drake to, 1, make some money, and to 2, become famous so that he could carry his family with him into the future. Even though the family seems loving and involved, there's no denying that there's still a sense of desperation. This is not a family that comes from Hollywood, where they understand and know all of the ins and outs. Instead, they are relying on the people around them to help guide Drake's career. In comes Dan Schneider and Brian Peck.
Then, when he was 12, an audition came up for the Amanda Show.
So Drake started out on the Amanda Show, and he and Amanda allegedly got along really well. But this is also where he first met Dan Schneider, who brought along Brian Peck. Brian was an integral part of Dan Schneider's team at Nickelodeon. In my mind, what I'm thinking and feeling is that Brian is over there abusing kids, males, and then Dan Schneider is acting inappropriately with the females. A big sense that we develop through this documentary is that abusers protect abusers. They hang out with each other and they protect one another.
I saw a spider and I was all, spider! And the spider was all...
Drake Bell talks about loving being on the Amanda Show. If you remember what we talked about before, the Amanda Show is kind of like a kid's version of SNL. So Drake got to be funny and silly on it while also making money for his family and getting a ton of attention. It's like a kid's dream.
Dan would be down on set and we'd hear him laughing, and then he'd come up and he'd give us different, ways to play something.
One thing that we'll see a lot of in this episode is that Drake is very positive and protective of Dan Schneider. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in future episodes.
He got along with everyone. Everyone got along with him. He'd been working in the industry for a very, very long time.
So now, sadly, Brian Peck comes on the scene in a pretty big way.
He knew tons about the history of Hollywood, and that's what I loved.
He convinces Drake and his family, as well as other kids on the set, that it would greatly benefit them to work with Brian outside of Nickelodeon, to take private dialogue coaching lessons with him. And of course, it doesn't hurt that Brian seems to have a special relationship with Dan Schneider, whom everyone on the set is trying so hard to please.
I was told that Brian was a good coach and that he could really get Drake some jobs. She worked with Leonardo DiCaprio.
That's how it works, right? You scratch my back, I scratch yours. And I also scratch Dan Schneider's back, and even Leonardo DiCaprio's. So all of these big names were connected to Brian Peck. Now, of course, we have to question why. But back then, Drake Bell's family was really impressed by all of it.
He worked with this person, that person. I said, oh, okay. Well, he said, oh, well, you need to come to my house because...
And slowly, the grooming process begins. Now, we can't just meet at the studio. I mean, there's no good light there for us, or we can't be in public when we're trying to work on our scenes, Drake. So your dad's gonna have to bring you over to my house. And then, do you need a ride home? Because we have to go kind of late with our practices. Drake Bell's father sensed that something wasn't right about all of this.
And unfortunately, I started seeing Brian start to just hang around Drake too much. And it didn't set well with me.
Drake's father had an uneasy feeling, but Brian was busy creating a sense of closeness and trust between himself and Drake. Drake had always loved old movies and Hollywood memorabilia. Well, this was perfect for Brian because he had a ton of it in his home and often threw parties revolving around all of that. Brian and Drake became close.
Brian and I became really close because we had a lot of the same interests.
Unfortunately, the lie that they just had a lot of the same interests was a big part of the grooming process.
Drake would be in the dressing room or something, and in would pop Brian and just touch Drake. Do things that, wait a second, what are you doing? Drake can put that on himself. Then he'd maybe walk over to Drake and be feeding him some lines or whatever and put his arm around his waist. Put his hand up on his shoulder and kind of run it down his arm and things like that. And this would happen routinely.
Leo, as you know, is the latest, hottest, hunkiest teen idol there is.
Yeah, his muscles.
I saw this video of Brian Peck on Growing Pains with Leonardo DiCaprio, grabbing his shoulder, running across him and going down his arm. That's the kind of behavior I saw him with my son.
Drake's dad, he sensed something was wrong. But here's the thing. When he tried to approach his feelings about being uncomfortable with Peck, with other people who worked on the set, He was made to feel like he was ostracizing Peck just because he was gay. People told him that Peck just acts differently with kids because he's gay. You feel uncomfortable with him because you're not used to being around gay people. This is how he acts. This is how he deals with kids. And you are the one who's being prejudiced against him.
And she goes, oh, well, I don't know if you knew it or not, but he's gay. Maybe you're just homophobic and you just...
And like I think many of us would, Drake Bell's dad became introspective. Like, maybe they're right. Maybe there's something going on here that I just don't understand, and I'm the one who's being inappropriate and prejudiced. So, Drake Bell's father backed off. He wanted the best for everyone, including his son, and, also he didn't want to single out Brian Peck needlessly. And the Amanda show was coming to a close. It was the end. And it was time for Drake to try to transition to his own show, which he had recently been offered, called Drake and Josh. Okay, but here's the thing. There's all this downtime between the end of the Amanda show and the start of the Drake and Josh show, which ends up becoming pretty popular on Nickelodeon. But during that downtime, I'm sure there was a lot of anxiety for people like Drake, not being 100% sure if he really is going to get this sitcom that's been promised to him, and whether or not it's going to take off and be an ongoing show that he can really depend on to, number one, feed his family, and number two, continue to feed his career. So in this intermission, Brian Peck starts getting into the head of Drake Bell.
He's the one that started telling Drake that I shouldn't be his manager, and I confronted Brian about that.
So Brian sowed the seeds in Drake's head that his dad was really lacking as a manager, and Drake could go so much farther if he had the right person managing his career.
So Brian started integrating himself into my life pretty heavily. He would come to my concerts.
Brian started to attend all of Drake's little concerts and started pretending like he loves everything Drake Bell is interested in, and he only wants to support him to be the best actor and musician he can possibly be.
And then there was a birthday party for Drake, and Brian wanted to have it at his house.
One step further. Brian convinces Drake to have his 15th birthday party at Brian's house because Brian is so cool and so is his place. But some things happen at the birthday party that Drake's dad isn't very happy with. When he goes to pick up his son and help take down all the decorations, he notices some inappropriate adult decor as part of the party theme, and he realizes, no, this is going way too far.
My dad started making it very difficult for Brian to be around me.
But we all know, so goes the story of being a teenager. Drake had already created a bond with Brian, and Brian had seemingly convinced him that he was the shiznit, and Drake's dad just couldn't handle how cool they all were. So Drake started pushing back against his father as well, and eventually enlisted the help of his mom, who had been waiting in the wings, wanting to have more control and time with her son, Drake.
So Brian really started getting into my mom's mind.
He found an attorney to find out about Drake's financial situation.
Yep, Brian takes it really far. He becomes friends with Drake's mom, starts manipulating and grooming her, and then helps her obtain custody and eventually become the manager for Drake.
And then I got a phone call from his mom saying, Drake doesn't want you to be his manager anymore.
Little did anyone realize things are about to get a lot worse for Drake Bell. With his dad as his manager, he at least had some protection and some stability and support from a family member in his life. But his mother, unfortunately, was really busy and ended up turning over a lot of the responsibilities for Drake to Brian Peck, therefore cementing a completely toxic relationship between this dialogue coach and this 15-year-old boy. You You will not believe what comes next. And I'm going to share with you everything that was available in the documentary, as well as information that was not provided by the series. There is so much to talk about when it comes to what really happened to Drake Bell. The abuse was violent, insidious, and like nothing most of us could imagine. My next video is going to come with a major trigger warning. I hope some of you can still join me down my next rabbit hole.